Hey, what's up, class? I just want to kind of like try to open your eyes to, something that you've sort of been exposed to your entire life, but you may not have ever thought about, all right? And it's important for me to say that these are just my opinions, okay? Yeah, I could argue that they're based on like, years and years of sociological research and human cultivation, but whatever, you guys are going to hear what you want because values are subjective. So I'm going to teach you one way to interpret this question. Do schools educate or indoctrinate? And these two words can mean the same thing in different contexts. Take right here for a second. Yes, this right here is just teaching kids how to like be in a line and play together, right? But kids who know how to stand in a line know how to stand in a line for Black Friday in order to spend money and keep the American economy going for the people who profit off of that sort of thing. Take this one here. Religious schools. They are a viable alternative to public schools, and a lot of parents choose them because they explicitly teach values. However, and they might see that as education. However, if you disagree with those values, you might argue that it's indoctrination, and you might argue against the idea that the government should spend money on religious schools. Let's take this one here. Notice how in this picture, this adult is standing. All of these children are sitting orderly, eyes focused, paying attention to her making hand signals. Now, is this teaching maybe counting, maybe how to find books in a library? Or is it teaching people to be passive and to listen to what authority figures who are, higher than them tell them? I don't know. Let's take a look here, where you see a school where professional military members are being trained, right? They're sitting orderly in lines, looking at an authority figure, training them for a job where they must listen to an authority figure. So these are just some of the things that we're sort of, you know, kind of considering as we ask the question, do schools educate or indoctrinate? It really depends on this. What's the role of education in forming our values? And the difference here is, do you agree with those values or not? That's what changes it from education or indoctrination. All right, let's move on. Remember this pyramid, right? We talked about how policy is based on, what happens in the physical world, like the way social institutions are set up. So, for example, the way your school is set up, or the fact that public schools exist in a certain way, is an example of policy. Those are based on a belief about what is right, what children should be taught. The curriculum that we're always taught is decided by somebody, right? Your teachers, myself included, make decisions about what to teach you and what not to teach you. So just ask yourself that. What are your teachers not teaching you? Those decisions that we make, that the school district makes, are based on certain values. So, like justice. Maybe we believe that all students should get the same curriculum because that is fair or just. Everybody gets equally the same. That would lead to not having different classes. Everybody takes straight English 10, right? Um, and that would be an example of that policy. And I wanted to kind of break this down into three questions you could ask yourself and that you are going to ask yourself. What qualities does school have? Because that is the policy that it's undergoing. Is the school set up really open? Are kids sitting in rows looking up at a person lecturing, implying that like that person, based on the belief, the perspective that that person is the giver of knowledge, which would be one of the beliefs that people who design the school hold. That's based on a value of like conformity, obedience, a value which again leads to a belief that you don't know information and that a teacher can put information into your head so that now you know it. But to do so, you don't need to be active in that process. You just like get the information drilled into you. That's a cultural value of like obedience, passivity. It's maybe ageist, believing that if people are older, they know more. Um, and like that value informs that belief, which later informs the policy, how your school is set up. Why are we learning this? Because if you can do things like you will here, if you can list the qualities of schools. So, for example, like Let's think about elementary schools, right? You have children walking around in lines, you have them encouraged to trust authority, right? What else do you have? You have usually you have children like, sitting in groups. You let them go outside, but that purpose of exercise is usually to burn energy so that they can sit longer. And you have them learn how to do things like count, read. However, what happens when somebody is bad, right? What happens when somebody questions authority? They are disciplined. Now, what beliefs would you have to have in order to justify that quality? Well, if you wanted to have kids always walk around in lines, you would have to believe that kids are chaotic and need to be brought to order. That requires, trusting authority. You would have to believe that, you know best. So believe in adult superiority. That idea of sitting, if students are sitting, you would have to believe that, again, they need to be controlled. You can't have kids learn if they're just getting up, walking around. At that same point, you know that, like, that's unrealistic. So you also believe that some compromises need to be made, things like recess. Then counting, reading, you have to believe in a set of like basic skills. So this isn't all bad. Like you believe that everybody needs certain basic skills. Oh, hey, qualities of school. Everybody goes. We have compulsory school in Colorado. At the same time, it's this part here that can be problematic, right? You can believe that children need to be disciplined. You might believe children need to be disciplined by being sent to like a punishment room, right? They have those. I can't. Oh God, I can't remember what they're called, but they're called. Shoot. Let's go on to a different one. One way that like Denver public schools got in trouble for disciplining is they would handcuff students as young as like 8, right? Actually, Denver public schools got in some hot water for how often they would handcuff elementary students. And what belief would you have to have? You would, at some level, believe that like deviant behavior is adult like or requires like adult, you know, system of punishment. Because handcuffs, like that's a restraint you use on adults. Now, what values are those beliefs based on? So we have order, we have superiority, we have a need to be controlled that kind of relates to order. You have this compromise, so like you have to, that your control is realistic. You do need basic skills. So you believe in both like social good, because there is a social good, a benefit to teaching students how to count and read. These basic skills connect to this social good. On the other hand, this deviance or this like controlling behavior as if you would adults, there's a real sense of like order that underlies that. And you can see the combination there between like desiring order from chaos, needing an authority figure to bring that order, that deviant behavior being treated like order or being needed to be brought to order. Now, last things last. And this is why we're really learning this, right? The reason I'm teaching you this is because I want you to be able to answer some of these questions. Like, and you can start either at the top or at the bottom here, right? But I want you to either start with this one or this one, whichever is easier, and ask yourself, what policy should schools have? Right? If you were going to design a school, what would it look like? Then what beliefs should that be based on, right? Do you believe that all children are good? Because if you believe all children are good, that school would look a lot different than schools that assume children are bad and need to be made good, right? And what values should guide how we educate students as a society? Should we be guided by compassion? Should we be guided by the fact that students need to grow up to be like workers, right? Should we, if we believe that students like are, chaotic and need to be brought to order, then we would do things like make them follow a bell schedule because we believe that they can't. So notice how all three of these are related to one another, and all three of these connect to one another, right? You can't, like, those values don't exist in isolation. Those values inform beliefs, which later inform how the world works. In this case, how schools work. And that's really what I want you to like notice today. As you read your book, I want you to continue noticing that, right? Ask yourself, what does education look like? Keep in mind that can be in a formal school or that can be like in a work training environment. What beliefs is that based on? Because the schools are set up by society. That means the beliefs the education is based on are the beliefs that society has. And then that final question is what values should guide how we educate students? In the book you're reading, what values guide how we educate students? Right? These are the questions I want you to ask, and these are the questions I want you to really focus your notes on. Now, you should have at the end of this that same kind of T chart that we've been talking about lately, right? Where you notice different things. And I want you to focus on school or really education, because education is a social institution. And really, we're looking at the values that society holds. Then I want you to note things like how the character responds, because this will do two things. We talked about individual and society conflicts. If you take a look at these two, you'll see either a conflict or you'll see agreement. Either one of those will tell you more about if society is successfully indoctrinating or educating that character. All right, guys. Like I said, continue reading. Use the reading schedule to guide like how far you should be today. Thanks, guys. Good luck.